All right, let's take a look at getting started with HTML5, this week's tutorial. Last week, we'll look at the history of the web, how to create an HTML document, inserting elements and attributes, metadata, as well as page titles, marking the sections, organizing with groups, text level elements, inline images, and character code symbols. Make lists with navigation lists, external links, and internal links, as well as email and phone numbers. This is the overall structure of an HTML document. We start out with a declaration of the type. For modern HTML, it will always be doctype HTML. Then you open with an HTML tag, which always closes itself. Then you follow that with a head tag, which also opens and closes. And inside of there, you have your meta character data, links to external sheets like your style sheets, and your scripts if you're using any. And you also add your title in here as well. Following that is the body tag, which opens and closes. And then you have the section tags, which are the headers, navs, footers, and there are a few others as well, which we'll get into later on. Inside here, you got an example of an HTML tag that is open or does not have a closing tag like the rest of these. Image ones do not. We'll talk about this closing slash, whether or not you have to do it or not. So the World Wide Web, basically huge effect on communication. You can make a website anywhere. A lot of places offer free hosting. Other places you got to pay. We will talk about how it started and where it is today. So a network, computers that talk to each other. It can be as small as a single computer talking to another computer, or it can be as big as the internet that we have today. You have hosts and nodes. The host and node can send or receive data, and a server provides information to other devices. Computers that receive the data are a client, and the client servers network basically has servers providing the information. Local area network, that's your home Wi-Fi. A small network within a building, department, or campus, even depending on the size of the campus. I believe our campus would be considered more of a wide area network. The largest WAN, of course, the internet. Tim Berners-Lee is the one who created the World Wide Web, or HTML itself, hypertext, in 1989, and allowed things to be linked together. Way back then, it was just text and nothing else. The document itself is a web page. They are served on servers, and you look at them through web browsers. Probably what you're looking at it through right now. The code for HTML is hypertext markup language. Basically, markup language describes content structure by identifying tagging and whatnot with different elements. Back in the old days, you used to do it for everything. There was no standard. It was pretty much the wild, wild west. And then the W3C was created to create standards, and most places now follow that. Technically, they don't have to, but it doesn't make sense not to. HTML 4.01 was in 1999, and today we use HTML5, which since its release has gotten iterative updates, but is still just called HTML5. XHTML was created as a competition. It did not get as popular as they expected. It was way harder to use in some regards, and HTML5, as I said, is now the current standard. Features can get deprecated or phased out, but older browsers may still require them. However, you're probably not going to be supporting a browser from the mid-90s. And here you see the timeline. HTML 1.0, HTML 2.0, HTML 3.2, 4.01, and then we had XHTML 1, which then followed up by 1.1, and then 2.0, but then was superseded again by 5.0. As of this slide, the current version is HTML 5.2, and 5.2 actually is not the current version. The current version is now just a living standard, which means it gets dynamically updated periodically. Most recent version was actually January 23rd. Tools, you can use something as simple as Notepad, a Notepad++, Visual Studio Code, code spaces like we will be using in this class, and GitHub. These are called an IDE. You can use ones like Dreamweaver, Autonomous Studio, NetBeans, Komodo. Visual Studio Code is an IDE. There are other variants of that out there. There are also ones called JetBrains. Google has its own now called Anti-Gravity. But for this class, we'll just continue using GitHub and GitHub Codespaces. A web content management system says how things can work for pre-made templates. You can integrate these with technologies and languages. And this is the setup for a web frameworks. In our class, you want to make sure your stuff is properly syntaxed, properly structured, and passes validation. Make sure your code renders correctly. You can either install multiple browsers, check them there, and you can use sites like they're saying here, BrowserStrack, cross-browser testing, and Browsera. So we'll take a look here at our HTML document. Briefly talked about these earlier. Two-sided tags are those with opening and closing elements. Empty elements or one-sided, they do not have a closing element. The element here has an attribute, which is alt for this case, alt here as well. Other attributes you might see are class, and ID, and as well as others. Your document type declaration, you need to set that in HTML5 using either exclamation doc type HTML or lowercase doc type HTML. Both of these will work. Element tags, those are the elements themselves. So your HTML tag opening close, that's an HTML element. Your title tag, that's a title element. And your general syntax here is open and closing elements. So for example, here's your paragraph. Those are open and closing p tags. Empty elements or one-sided elements use the one-sided element tag. Either of these are interchangeable. However, if you run the element tag with the closing slash in it through the W3C validator, you will get a informational error that should not count against your grading, and it will basically tell you that it is not necessary and you don't need to use it. For HTML, that is true, but if you're using XHTML or anything that's XML based, you do need it for that purpose. Use it in HTML, but for plain straight HTML5 coding, you do not require it, but it will accept it either way. And then elements can be within other elements, like you saw with the HTML element holding both the head and the bodies, and each of those also contain nested elements. With your head and body are your two main sections, and each of those contain their own several subsections as well. You always put the head first, followed by the body. This is the hierarchy that you go through. Start out with your doc type, and then your head content, your body content. Always ensure you have your closing tags. Attributes. You can set those with values in quotes, and this is the issue where you will run into with those single-sided elements. If you did not have quotes around your attributes, it would mess with those. Values can have attribute minimization by setting them to hidden, and that would mean that it isn't shown on the page. White space character, anything that's space, tabs, or line break. Makes your stuff easy to read, but it will not render any differently. Theoretically, if you were to write your entire HTML page with everything on one single line of long continuous code, where you immediately follow the closing bracket for your doc type with HTML, immediately followed by your head, followed by your content, all in one line, it would still render properly. You would not be able to read the code very well, so the best practice is for human readable capabilities to make sure that you follow this process where you have everything on its own line. If you just go to your browser, you can actually open up the page that way. You can follow the steps here to see how it works on both a mobile and a tablet device as opposed to a web browser. Later on, we will go into how to code specifically for smaller screens. With how popular phones are these days, we will be adopting mobile first coding, where we worry about how it looks first on a small screen and then continue building up from there. So HTML is structure, not appearance. That is done through style sheets. For HTML, those are cascading style sheets, which we'll go into next chapter. You can do HTML lang en. The validator will suggest you do this. If you don't, metadata is data about the data. So the browser can look at that and figure things out. Your document head has the head element itself, which contains all of these inside. Base, location for link, relative links. Link itself is, say, linking to an external source like your cascading style sheets. Metadata, this is information we'll do a lot later on with keywords, character encodings, viewports. That's how you change what screen size you're on. This is how you load in JavaScript. Style, if you want to add in-text CSS, you would use the style tag there. And the title, basically what shows up in your browser bar. We see our title is about curbside tie, and when you load in this page into your browser, it would say about curbside tie up on the browser there. Metadata are your attributes. Character encoding, this is one that you use to add. Want to use UTF-8. So that char set equals UTF-8. This one you should also always have in here. And then meta, if you want keywords, you can set those as well. HTML comments go in using the less than exclamation dash dash comment dash dash closing greater than. You can add comments in the head talking about what things are doing. I expect to see comments in your code so that I understand that you recognize your code and you let me know that you knew what it was you actually did and understand your code. That's what I'd like to see in your assignments. And as it said, it can be spread across several lines. So if you did your open comment here, as long as you had it close multiple lines later with dash dash greater than, anything inside of those two tags would be a comment and would not be rendered by your browser. You can see how that works here. You open your comment, add in all of your information, you close your comment. That is for me to read, for you to read, for anybody who looks at your code to read, but the browser will ignore it. You use sectioning elements for your body, and they are semantic elements because they describe what they're done for. You've got your address, articles, asides. The body is the actual area, the footer, the header, your header tags, H1 through H6. These are unrelated to the actual header, but they can be used in conjunction with them. The nav or navigation links and sections, which you can name your own. So for example here, this is an example of a layout. See how much easier it is here? Rather than creating division elements, you just make it as is. So your header, your navigation section, your just section, your article, and your sites, as well as your footer. Now note that your header and your footer are both contained within your actual body, as well as all of your other sections. Your grouping elements, you can do block quotes, divisions if you need to set a generic version. A DL are list elements, and these are the descriptions for those as well. Figures are something for a cross-reference, the caption for that. HR is a horizontal rule or break. They can be stylized. The main element is the content that should only be used once per page. And then you have your list types, which are ordered or unordered. You can think of that as either numbered or lettered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A, B, C, D, E, etc. And unordered would be, say, bullet points. And the elements within inside there are your LI or list item. P are your paragraphs, and pre is pre-formatted text, or it looks like it's written in a monospace font. The actual text you're looking here on this page, all of these element names, those are pre-formatted text. If this was in a browser, that's how you would look at them and see them in the code. They'd be highlighted by PRs. You also have hyperlinks as A, that actually should be lowercase, not uppercase. Abbreviations, B and I, do not use those. Those are elements that are now superseded by using a couple other ways to do so or using CSS. Code will also do something similar to your PRE. Strong, that's what you would prefer for bold. Strong for that, for italics. B, I, U, underline, do not use that either. These are all things that you would set through your CSS. So do not do those. And you can add in forced line breaks here with word breaks if you want to add in a specific place. And as I was saying, the style sheet, that's where you do your styles. For this chapter, you only need to know how to link one. Next chapter will actually begin doing some designing work. So you can add this type here as well. Not necessary, but you can use it. Link href file equals that file name. rel equals that style sheet. You see it's all in quotes. And then you can also add type equals text/CSS. But these are the only two you need is the link href and the rel. Because you have to say what type of file or what the relationship is to the link. It can infer it, but this is the correct context, and it will be marked wrong if it isn't added for the REL. Also, you see here, we see a base and a layout too. So base, CSS. This is the stuff that loads first. And then layout 2, we could say that specifically for this page or for some other aspect of your page. And the way it works is if, say, you've got tags that are defined in both of these, if there is a tag that's defined in here that says make our text red, and there's a tag in here that says no, I want our text to be blue, the bottom one will be the one that takes precedence. It's the same way within the actual individual HT or CSS files, but that's stuff for next week. Character sets, that would be things that get rendered across the browser, character entities. They have special syntax for those. This is a way where UTF can come into play pretty heavily, and you can look those up and use that. So, for example, if you want to add the ampersand as a character, you would do ampersand, AMP, semicolon, and that would add in the ampersand. Or you can also add character codes or the UTF-8 codes from in there also. Embedded content, your images, videos, other interactive objects, you use an embed element. An image file is an example of that. You embed the image file in, and you have to have alt text describing the image, or you can say it's just decorative. You can specify specifically how big you want it in pixels, but you don't need to if the file is the correct size. Empty tags, like you said here, they don't enclose text. Line breaks say move on to a new page. Word break says specifically where to have something happen. A horizontal rule makes a line across the page. You can put extended quotes inside of a block quote, and it will set them separately, but you can also use CSS to format these differently. And you have multiple types of lists. Ordered lists, as I was saying, shows things in sequential order, A, B, C, D, E, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Unordered, doesn't matter what order they're in. Description lists, items with descriptions, and navigation lists, lists with hypertext in that nav element. The navigation lists are usually consist of unordered lists hiding within inside of it. Hypertext tags, href equals some URL, some link content, which is a descriptor of that. And if you click it, it would follow to that link. And you can use roller over effects with CSS that can change and show how those are different. You can use inline images in your links as well. You can see how that works here by adding an image in instead of the plain text. And your folder path. You could set your root folder. Generally, you're going to be using relative file names as opposed to absolute file names. The home page is in your root folder. You could create a subfolder your HTML. It's generally just best practice to create a subfolder for your images and your CSS and JavaScript if applicable. However, you absolutely must have your index.html in your root folder. Relative path is in location to wherever that current document is. You can set a base URL to where things start. And you can do internal links by using your element ID tags. ID tags, as it says, are unique as opposed to class tags, which can be used multiple times. If you've got a section of if you've got a footer section and you want to be able to navigate to your footer, you make sure that ID for that footer is a specific name. And if you had two IDs, both named jump point, if you had two of them, it could only recognize the first one. If you want to jump to an external file with this ID tag, you use that file name with a pound sign with the ID. Pound sign, hashtag, octothorpe, whatever you want to call it. Web pages were marking locations with anchor tags. This is now deprecated, and you use the ID tags now. Linking out to the world using make sure you add your URL with the scheme and location. The schema is basically your protocol. HTTP or HTTPS, preferably HTTPS at this point. You can also set to fax. That should also, again, be lowercase. File, FTP, Geo, HTTP, HTTPS, L2, TEL, MS. These are all variable options for your link type. The web resources uses this style of path. Mail to is mail to address, so mail to somebody at somebody. Tel is tel phone. See, there are spaces here, but there should not be. Should be no space between mail to colon and the start of that address. Same with your telephone, and these are specific formats where you have to do that. We'll go over that later on. These attributes, basically, the browser will then figure out what to do and how to use them. Here you see href equals URL as an attribute. Target, you could say how to open it. Blank, parent, self, top. By default, it will do self because it'll open in the same location it's in. You can tell it to download something. Type, as we talked about earlier, the type of file it is. You can set the language for that and the MIME type. So if you want to open a new window or tab, you say target window. Validation, you can use the Web W3C validator. If you go into GitHub code spaces, you can add extensions inside of there. And there's a validator that you can get from there. Thanks for listening. Have a good rest of your week.